tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, Brian, we started a firestorm last week. We were talking about soil tests just a little bit, and I don't know why, but people are always up in the air about, well, my lab does it this way and mine does it this way. Well, one of those things that some labs really believe in and others don't is base saturation. We're going to talk about this important reading on a soil test and tell you exactly what you can do with base saturation and what you can't.
Well, before you go into next season, one of the things that we want you to consider addressing is problem areas in specific fields on your farms. I mean, just think about it for a second. If you took the worst 5% in terms of areas in your fields and you all of a sudden made that great, how much would that affect the overall average on your farm? I think it'd be huge on most farms. So we want to talk about how to fix some of those problem areas today.
Well, one thing that may be a problem in some areas of the field could be our weed of the week. We'll show you how to control this tough weed, but first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
If you've got a small pasture or if you have thousands of acres of pasture, one of the most important things you can do is keep weeds under control so you can get more grass growth for your animals. And when we're thinking about weed control, fall is a fantastic time to control weeds in pastures for a number of reasons that we'll talk about today.
Whether you're a farmer or you're just a non-farmer with a little acreage, there are just some important lessons that we want to talk through here. Number one is, if you do have a small acreage and you do not have a restricted use license, in other words, a private pesticide applicator's license, you can still go out in most states, if it's your ground and you're just talking about a handful of acres, and spray products out there without a license. We don't encourage that though. We want you to get a license. We want you to understand how to use these pesticides, and also then you would be allowed to buy products that are considered restricted use. In other words, in pasture, we've got some good options that you wouldn't be able to use, including Tordon and Grazon, if you didn't have the proper license.
Well, the other thing about getting a license is just understanding pesticide safety more for yourself. So you aren't worried about, boy, I really wonder about this stuff, if I'm doing the right thing or if it's going to be safe for my animals or my family around. You don't need to be in that situation. It's really easy to get a license in most states. You just have to do a little bit of studying. It's not a real big deal. But again, you feel much more confident and you have access to products you wouldn't otherwise have.
Yep, so that's the first and most important thing that we tell you. Make sure you're getting that license. Number two is, when Darren brought up the whole fall application thing, we talk about fall so much because a lot of these perennial and biennial weeds are taking lots of nutrients and they're throwing it down into their great big root systems below the ground. It's a great time to get pesticides also to go right along with that down into the big root systems of some of these plants and completely kill the plant once and for all.
Well, the other thing I look at though, Brian, is when you're talking about a fall treatment, now that plant's trying to store up energy for the winter. If you can damage that plant, even if you don't completely kill it, if you damage it going into the winter, now it's much less likely to survive through the winter. So if we have a tough winter and we get some winter kill out there on a normal year, if you've got damaged plants, they're much more likely to die.
However, let's talk about that damage first. So let's say that you get your first hard killing frost in the fall. Usually that doesn't completely wipe out your perennial and biennial growth above ground. It just dings up crops like corn and soybeans, things like that. But after a frost comes, you are much less likely to get herbicide into plants because leaf tissue has now been damaged. So the reason why we're talking about this today, and you may say, fall? It's not fall yet, it's not even close to fall. Well, yes, but we need to have you thinking about this in advance. We want you spraying a couple of weeks before your normal first frost date in the fall. Then you will have, chances are, a lot better success than if you spray after the first frost.
And the other thing is, if you need to go get a license, now's the time to do it. You got to get after it right away this week and get that license. In some states, it may take just a little bit of time to get that done. So find out where the classes are, if there are classes, or if you just need to go in and take a test, or if you can do it online. You got to find all those details out. Then you have to find where you're going to get your products that you're going to spray out in your pasture and get equipment lined up and everything else that you may need to take care of. So it is kind of crunch time out there. Unless you're all set to go and you've been doing this for years, you may have a little bit of time. But we'll get into some products here and maybe help you out making the right selection.
Okay, so over the years, a lot of people that have pastures say, well, I just want to get by cheap. Well, you can do that, but if you get by cheap, you're going to probably have to spray lots and lots of times to do decent weed control. In fact, just today, when I was on the way over here for where we were going to film today, I talked to a guy who was out spraying some thistles in ditches. Well, guess what? Same guy spraying the same thistles in the same ditches, and the same thing does happen to us sometimes on our own farm too, where we find ourselves repeating this same pattern year after year. How about if we invest a few more dollars and do the job one time instead of doing the job 8 years in a row? So if you want to go out with just 2,4-D, our recommendation is typically to use LV6 in the fall. 2 quarts per acre will probably wipe out just about anything you've got in terms of above ground growth, but it's not real good at controlling below ground great big root systems on perennials or biennials. Otherwise, you can look at Tordon, Milestone, or even Chaparral.
Now, when we're talking about spraying these products that get down into the perennial root system, oftentimes you're going to see control last for more than a year. If you're in an area that gets 10 inches of rainfall or less, in many cases, we're going to see weed control happen for at least a couple of years out of that because you haven't had enough moisture to help break that pesticide down.
Yeah, that's great, but the downside of that is you're going to have carryover if you ever turn that pasture into crop ground. So if you're planning in the next 10 years to turn your pasture into crop ground, don't use Tordon, don't use Milestone, don't use Chaparral. They're fantastic products and we want to use them in pastures, but the amount of time you would have to wait until you planted a broadleaf crop is going to be potentially up to 10 years.
Well, here's the other side of that, Brian. If you've got animals that are grazing out in that pasture and then you're going to move them somewhere else, when they have all that plant material that they've just eaten that now contains some Tordon or Milestone, you have to be careful where their manure ends up. So if you run them over somewhere else, like into a field, we have a lot of guys that will have cattle in a pasture and then they'll move them into a field to graze corn stalks, for example. They're going to, for a couple of days, need to be somewhere where all that manure can work out of their system to get rid of the Tordon or Milestone before you get into a field situation. Just one of those long-term considerations. If you've got an acreage, you've just got a little pasture and you've got a couple of horses or a couple of head of cattle out there, this isn't a big concern for you. But if you're a crop farmer and also have some pasture ground, you're going to move the livestock between the two things, that's where you have to be concerned about the products you're using.
Okay, a couple last things. Tordon is the very best at killing trees. It's the very best at killing leafy spurge. Milestone is the very best at killing thistles. Chaparral, where do you like Chaparral, Darren?
Well, I like that any of the woody species. So if you get some buckbrush or something like that, that's where I really like Chaparral.
Okay, let's talk about safety real quick. All 3 of these products, very safe to humans. Now, certainly you don't want to take a bath in it or anything else, but Tordon, Milestone, Chaparral, all very safe, especially when comparing them with almost any other pesticide in the market.
Well, even 2,4-D that we were talking about, it isn't that dangerous a product. It's been out for 40 years and it's been proven not to be a carcinogen. Again, you want to use all the safety precautions that you're supposed to and read the label to make sure you're doing the right things. But these are pretty safe products to be around for you and for your animals.
Well, once again, we just think it's very important to get weeds under control and not just go out there and spray every single year or spray 2 or 3 times a year. Try to hit them one time, do a good job, and completely eliminate especially biennial and perennial noxious weeds.
Well, fortunately, our Weed of the Week is just an annual brand, but it can be tough to control. Could you identify this week's weed?
For lower cost, higher production, Mandaco Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Twister's ease of maintenance is forgiving and rocks and has contour conformity equaling 0 downtime. Our hydraulically adjusted coulter angles make residue management easier, less costly. Spring or fall, the Mandaco Twister vertical tillage unit is the new leader. See your Mandaco Agri dealer. Visit northcountrymarketing.biz or call.
You expect a lot from this seed, and as it grows through each stage of development, Agroculture Liquid Fertilizers is there, feeding your crop exactly what it needs when it needs it. So no matter how you fertilize, no matter when, AgroLiquid efficiently brings all the nutrients your crop needs for a great harvest. From 1 kernel in the ground to 600 on the ear. For better yields and better quality, Agroculture Liquid Fertilizers.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
Looking to maximize yield? Quick Roots is a microbial seed inoculant that allows the plant root to explore a greater volume of soil, the key to higher yields. Quick Roots continues to generate yield response on corn, soybeans, wheat, and more. Quick Roots is applied to the seeds so the live microorganisms go right to work, enhancing seedling vigor, increasing the uptake of certain nutrients, including NPK, and expanding root volume. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your local dealer and get your Quick Roots today.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
I don't care whose farm you're on, Brian. There are small areas all across the farm that aren't as productive. And I look at these as problem areas and great opportunities to improve profitability on the farm and also do something productive with the resources that we have.
Now, this allows a person to fall into a trap sometimes because you might look at your farm, especially like ours, where we have a lot of rolling hills and we have some grass waterways. And you say, well, that's unproductive ground that I'm not getting paid for. But we have to look at the big picture here and look at why those grass waterways got put in there in the beginning. And maybe they're a little too wide, maybe they're a little too long. You can address those things that way. But I guess just please understand, we're not talking about eliminating all practices that are going to lead to erosion prevention and things like that. We have to address some of those things too. What we're talking about here is normal farm areas, normal crop areas where you're going along and the yield monitor dips from 200 bushel corn down to 125, or for that matter even 150. And you start adding up all those spots across the farm and think about how many thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that costs each and every year. It's a big deal. You can invest a lot of dollars and take a lot of time to fix those problem areas, and you'll have a lot more dollars at the end of the season.
Many farms are going to see their yield monitor maps, and they're going to look at their fields and see all the pretty different colors there about where the yield was. And yeah, you can pull out those spots and say, well, this one didn't yield as well. But why?
That's right.
We need to do some further investigation. So that's going to involve soil testing in the fall, certainly. And if you see an area in your field that isn't as productive, do some tissue analysis now. Go out and look at those plants. Maybe there's a disease problem. Maybe there's a soil problem. You just don't know, or maybe you just picked the right hybrid for one soil type in your ground, but not in this other soil type. It's not performing as well there, and you just need to make a different hybrid selection. There's a lot of things that could be going on in those problem areas in your field, but right now you still have crop growing out in the field. You can get some investigation done at this point, but in the fall, again, we're going to be right back to doing soil tests and analyzing things that way.
We're discussing this topic today because 10 years ago or so, land was relatively cheap compared to today. And back then, you could just buy more land rather than fix the problem areas in your field. Well, now, not only is land expensive, but it's hard to get more land. I mean, you're probably not going to have the resources to just keep going and buying more and more and more and more. Why not fix the ground that you've got today? And like I say, even if it's only 5% of your total acres, if you really address that, you might have $100,000 more dollars at the end of the season. I don't know. It just depends on how much ground you got.
Well, you're totally in control of the land that you have already. That's one thing. And the other thing is your economic return on investment is going to be much better fixing up that ground that you already have, because you know what? You already have a level. Maybe it's 125 bushel corn in that area and the rest of your farm yields 200. Well, you're already starting out with something. And now you can go out and look, like I say, in this year's crop and also with this fall's soil tests and address things quickly. You can change them for next year, and every year after that, you're going to get the benefit too.
The trap a farmer can fall into is, well, it's just soil type. I'm never going to change that ground. There's nothing much I can do. Oh, it's a lot of work. How am I going to figure out this stuff? So you just have to set your mind to it that, you know what, I am going to figure out what's the problem in that area. It does start after harvest with soil testing, but like Darren said, you want to be evaluating your field season long. What we're doing throughout the year is we're doing things like plant tissue analysis. We're constantly scouting the fields, taking a look at well, how does this stuff look? Is there anything that needs to be addressed? So
Well,
we talked last week on the show about soil pH. It could be, a number of different things.
even as you're driving through with the combine and all of a sudden you see that yield monitor drop from 200 to 125 or from 200 to 50 or whatever, stop the combine. Get out, take a look, see what's going on. Maybe you say, wow, my stalks are really rotten here. I got a stalk rot problem. You'll never know that if you don't stop right then at that point and take a look. And I know you probably have a brother like I do who that combine's not stopping for anything. We're gonna roll. We're gonna get another grain cart. We're gonna get more trucks. We're gonna get a faster unload at home, whatever it takes. We gotta keep that combine rolling. No, that combine has to stop because all of a sudden we've got this problem area. And yeah, maybe it's only 5% of your whole farm that you have a problem on. So what? I wanna find out what that 5% is. And when there's crop still standing, even if it's at the combine and ready to go in, you can still learn some stuff right there. So find out at that point what's going on. Maybe it's a crop disease, maybe it's a soil nutrient issue, who knows what it is, but your best chance to find it is when you're looking at some standing crop.
So over the next couple of months here on Ag PhD, we're going to be talking through some of these different issues, what it could be out in your field, and just be thinking about all the time, hey, am I going to run into this problem that they're talking about this week, and what can I do to address it? Even if it's only on a few acres, that could make a big difference in your net profit at the end of the season.
Well, of course, one of those problems you may find in areas of your field is weed control. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed later in the show.
At Titan Machinery and Case IH, we offer better solutions for all your production needs. It's more than our job, it's who we are. We are parts. We are service. We are training. And most importantly, we are here for you. In any season, for every reason, we've got you covered. Case IH and Titan Machinery, better solutions.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave P. Most of your applied P gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more P available to your roots, here, here, and here. Increasing P availability can lead to increased P uptake in the plant. That's more P, and more P. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your P with Avail.
Upgrade your trailer to electric with the Rolltech electric system from AgriCover. Strong, flexible pivot arms and motor mount rotate and telescope, allowing the roll tube to rise and flex over heaped loads. The positive automatic lock is impossible to back off to control the flow of grain. This integrated system uses one wireless remote to operate up to 10 tarps and hoppers, keeping your driver out of the dust, rain, and harm's way. See the Rolltech system in action at an AgriCover dealer near you.
If you want to take your farm to the next level, you have to go where the in-field research is being done. Hi, I'm Darren Hefty with Ag PhD TV. One of the field tours that Brian and I have enjoyed the most each summer is the North Central Research Station tour in Michigan. There are over 500 acres of replicated trials in corn, soybeans, wheat, and numerous other crops. You'll learn more about crop fertility in a few hours than most farmers will in a decade. Visit agriliquid.com for all the details, and maybe we'll see you there.
We're in a series right now on Ag PhD talking about how to read a soil test. It's super important. The scary thing is, unfortunately, there are a lot of people making fertilizer recommendations in our country that don't know how to read a soil test. So we want you as a farmer to learn how to do it on your farm. And if nothing else, if you still want to take the advice of some fertilizer dealer, you can do that. But now you got a lot more things to quiz him on.
Well, everybody thinks soil tests are so complicated, and honestly, if Brian and I can understand it, you can certainly understand it. It just takes a little bit of practice, and the good thing is, if you have your own farm and you're looking at your own soil tests, you take a lot of ownership of those, and whenever I've got some skin in the game or I've got some money invested in this thing, I want to learn a lot better, and I normally do learn a lot quicker.
So one of the most important things that we want you to look on the soil test is base saturation.
Now, hold on.
Soil test,
I would say this, a lot of soil tests don't have base saturation. So what I would say is, as you're getting ready to take some soil tests this fall, make sure that your soil test is going to come back with a base saturation reading. So if your lab says, well, that's going to cost an extra $2, spend the extra $2. It's really worth it. And if your lab says, what? No, we don't believe in base saturation, we suggest considering another lab.
Okay, with base saturation, it's a little bit complicated, so we're going to talk about some of the basics today, and then we'll discuss it in a little bit more detail in just a few weeks. But just so you understand what it is, it's basically a ratio of 5 different nutrients. So we've got sodium in there and hydrogen. We also have calcium, magnesium, and potassium. And potassium is the one in particular that we want to look at first, because like on our own farm and on many farms we find across the country, that reading is too low. In other words, even if you have a parts per million level that says, hey, it's pretty good out in the field, don't trust that. What you need to trust more is base saturation. The reason why is if you don't have a good ratio of potassium to these other 4 nutrients, the potassium just isn't getting into the plant. So I can have all the parts per million I want on potassium, but if my level of potassium in base saturation is below 4%, I still need more potassium out in that field.
Well, that's pretty easy. You can add more potassium. Another one that is also fairly easy is calcium. If you're low in calcium, you can just add more calcium in a variety of different sources. If you're below about 60% calcium on that base
65.
saturation, then we would suggest putting on some lime. Once we're above that and we're still a little bit low compared to where we'd like to be on calcium, you may use something like calcium sulfate or gypsum. So there are just a number of different ways you can fix that. With magnesium in our part of the world, we're typically high rather than low because of the type of clay that we have in our soil. But that's another one you may look at in your part of the world. Maybe you're low on magnesium and you just need to add more in your fertility program.
With magnesium, we'd like to see roughly 12% to 25% in the base saturation test. With sodium, we want that less than 1%. Too much sodium is a bad thing. Same thing with hydrogen. Too much is a bad thing. We want the hydrogen percentage less than 10%. If the hydrogen is high, that means you have a low pH soil. It's pretty easy to fix. Just put lime out there. That will raise your pH and it will lower that hydrogen level down.
We're just kind of giving you a big, broad overview. As Brian said, this is an important topic, and it's going to take just a little bit of explanation, and it'll be real simple for you to understand for your farm. We're going to get into more of the details of all these things as we get later on into the fall here and as you get closer to pulling those soil samples after your crop comes off.
Well, another important thing on the farm is controlling our weed of the week. We'll tell you how to do it on your farm coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
You work to protect your farm's legacy and to keep it going. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our weed of the week is wild Proso Millet. It's a little different than Proso Millet the crop that has a cream colored to tan colored seed. Wild Proso Millet typically has a brown to black colored seed. So that's something a little different. It's a little bit bigger seed than what we'll normally see. And as the plant grows, it has a little wider leaf than most of the other grasses and a spreading inflorescence that as soon as you see that, you're going to know what wild Proso Millet is.
As always, it's more difficult to control a grass weed in grass crops like corn and wheat. So let's start there. In wheat, this usually isn't a major problem because wild Proso a lot of times will come up just a little bit later in the season, so the wheat can choke it out. But if you're concerned about it, you can start with Prepare and follow up post-emerge with Axial.
Well, I think that Prepare is very important. Getting a pre-emerge out there in any crop is going to wipe out quite a few of the wild Proso Millet plants first. Then that leaves fewer plants to control post-emerge, and in those thicker patches, now you've thinned them out a little bit and you can get better coverage. So like in corn, for example, we've always liked Eradicane better. it does take double incorporation, which isn't an option for every grower. So in those cases, I'd go Harness, Surpass, Outlook Dual.
Yeah, but they're real weak.
And then come back post-emerge with a Roundup or Liberty. You need to have a good, strong post like Roundup or Liberty to kill it.
Yeah, Accent's okay on it in conventional corn, but that Wild Proso's got to be real small. In soybeans, this is easy to stop. Treflan, Sonaline, or Prowl down. Follow with Select Max or just about any other grass killer post-emerge.
Well, that's all for our Weed of the Week, Wild Proso Millet, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
Fall fertilizing is right around the corner. We'll explain one concept that's growing in popularity in today's Iron Talk. Deep fertilizer placement is happening on more acres each season across the country. On our farm, we prefer using a shank and placing fertilizer down 8 to 10 inches in the soil for a few reasons. First, the shank allows the deepest placement. Second, plant roots will reach the 8 to 10 inch deep fertilizer very early in the growing season. Third, we find deep fertility helps improve drought tolerance greatly. Early season roots proliferate deeper in the soil profile because there is fertilizer there. And when the topsoil dries out, it takes quite a while before it gets bone dry that deep. Finally, we really like deep placement because especially when you place nutrients like phosphorus and potassium deep in the soil, they are much less likely to leave your field due to erosion since they really don't move much in the soil. Broadcasting these nutrients leaves them at risk to heavy rains, flooding, and other weather conditions that could cause them to end up in a river or stream. There are many reasons to consider deep placement of fertility on your farm. If you're going to do it this fall, we suggest using a shank, but you need to get the equipment in place now to get it done. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello design chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
Honey Wagon? Can the sweet talk. Out here we treat manure, and when we talk treats, we don't mean cupcakes. Treating manure with More Than Manure Nutrient Manager can reduce solids in your pit or lagoon and ammonia levels in confinement buildings. PU, try N and P. MTM is the first and only nutrient manager proven to reduce nitrogen loss and phosphorus lockup. That's fertilizer loaded with yield potential. Looking for proof? Check the bin. Isn't that sweet? Results you can't ignore. A pit you finally can.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done. Which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
What's new for 2013? Challenge 2050. Challenge 2050 is a two-component system consisting of a nutrient and a biological additive. This groundbreaking fertilizer contains mycorrhizal fungi, which provide an extended transport system that allows water and nutrients to be delivered directly into the root. Challenge 2050 can increase yield and efficiency of your standard fertilizer program. Challenge 2050 is the future of fertilizer. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get Challenge 2050 today.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's show, but be sure to tune in again next time for another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Plants actually tell farmers what nutrients they need. They don't do it verbally, but farmers get the information through plant tissue analysis. It's another way farmers practice responsible nutrient management. To learn more, visit rnmf.org.